Here. This side here, no.
That's the good side?
This is the good side right here.
Good thing
where the hair's parted, yeah.
Well, at least you still have hair, Joe.
Yes, for now.
So, Joe, I brought you a little bit of vinyl. Thank you.
Oh.
Who doesn't like promotional-only DJ singles more than Joe?
Remember When You Were a Kid by Faygo Beverages. Wow. That's interesting. And Faygo, E. Lubunsky.
I looked him up. I went on Discogs. He was one of New York City's preeminent jingle writers. So I do not remember the jingle. And
you have to play the record to find out.
That's right. So,
yeah, that's really cool. I got the Coca-Cola one somewhere
Coke
over there.
after Coke after, all the one with all the different.
It was the New Seekers one.
Okay.
Like to buy the world of Coke.
Okay.
Yeah, I found that one, and I got a Budweiser one around here somewhere too. So thank you. That's really cool. Faygo. Yeah, they still make that stuff.
Have you been to Mark's?
Well, of course.
Do you see the bargain soda pop marked Faygo?
Well, yeah, but usually I'm looking for that. I'm looking for RC Cola.
Man, I am with you. I am an RC Cola guy myself. And if I'm not mistaken, it's made by Faygo at this point.
No way.
I'm almost positive, Joe.
I thought it was made by 7-Up Dr. Pepper, but I could be wrong.
You could be right, but did you ever have Cotton Club?
Oh.
Do you know about Cotton Club? That was Cleveland's pop.
Yes, and right now in the woods, I kid you not, somewhere in the woods right now is an old Cotton Club bottle. My kids found it. And so it's there with a collection of other glasses in the woods right now. The label's very faded, but it's still a rather neat thing. So I'll have to try to get it down here in the basement.
The basement. And the basement is key. This is where all the genius happens, isn't it?
I don't know about genius, but I have my moments, I suppose.
So we're here with Jumpin Joe Madigan, who most of the world came to know from this radio station, WJCU 88.7. And there's been an evolution in the basement doings, hasn't there? You're still on the radio in Cleveland, but where else are you on the radio?
Oh, yes.
All over.
Yeah, so I'm on a handful of low-powered FM stations right now. Nothing, no 100,000 watt stations or anything like that. I'm on a radio station out near Portland, Oregon called KQRZ 100.7 FM, and I've developed a bit of a following there. So it's been really cool to hear from a lot of people up in the Pacific Northwest. And and I'm also there's the guys at the barber shop in Chagrin Falls, the Mug and Brush. They listen at 12 o'clock on Saturdays at northcoastgreatesthits.com, and my international listeners also listen at that time because of the time zone change. It works out better for them.
How do you guys get any kind of ratings or figures of views? Like on my YouTube, I get amazingly detailed statistics. Do you get that kind of stuff from your streaming stations or platforms?
Well, I can only see how we're doing in terms of streaming at WJCU specifically, and so I'll check on my phone, and it usually is in the range of about 80 to 100 people listening on WJCU.org. How many are listening over the airwaves? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Can't measure that.
So that's the only place it streams is on WJCU.org?
Well, it streams there. The other stations that I'm on also stream. There's a station in Peoria, Illinois, WEPQ. They stream at Live 365, along with New York Oldies, WNYC-DB. Yeah, all the stations that I'm on, they stream.
Okay, cool.
So if you can't hear me on Saturdays from 5 to 7 on WJCU, you can listen throughout all of Saturday and parts of Sunday too. So look for the station near you, I suppose.
Are the shows archived anywhere for an amount of time?
They are. They are permanently archived at basementradioshow.com. Just don't tell anybody. Well, I do mention the archives on the radio show, but you know there's a little bit of a fine line there because of copyright and streaming stuff and whatnot.
I see.
I try to fly under the radar with that because I figure, I play a record from the John Lee Group, for example. So the John Lee Group, they're out of Toronto, Canada. Are they going to get any royalties if I play them? Probably not.
And are they going to get exposure from getting played? Because very few people do. Yes.
Yeah. Like here's one from Harvey Scales and the Seven Sounds. I got this at the WCSB Record Fair last year or 2 years ago. It's the original version of Love-itis.
Wow.
Which has been done by countless bands, as I've discovered over the years.
It's not just Jay Giles anymore.
Right. Or the Sonics do a version. Mandela out of Toronto, they do a version. And somebody out in North Ridgeville requested a version that I wasn't familiar with, and off the top of my head I forgot who it is. So a lot of people have covered the song, but I digress.
When did you start your radio career?
That was in the fall of 2003. I grew up in St. Louis, and so a little bit about my background. My family and my ancestors have lived in Cleveland since the mid-1800s. And out of the whole lineage of Madigans, I am the only one that did not grow up in Cleveland.
Wow.
I grew up in St. Louis, so obviously my dad grew up in Cleveland. Actually, he grew up right down the street from John Carroll. And so growing up, I always saw the school. That's how it got on my radar when I was a little kid, just driving by John Carroll. And so growing up in St. Louis, I was always interested in radio. Certainly got interested in collecting records when I was 16, when nobody was collecting records.
What year? How?
So this would have been about 2000.
Okay, the golden age of buying vinyl for nothing.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. I remember going down to the Record Exchange in St. Louis. So the Record Exchange in St. Louis, it's in an old library, and there's 2 stories. So all of the LPs are all over the place on the first floor. I mean, the place is huge, and on the second floor is where all the 45s are. And right off the bat, I was always interested in the 45s because my very first record player is right over here. Yes, this is the famous record player that I talk about. So this one right here, this is my very first record player. It's the, I don't know, it's a GE record player, and it was, it's perfect for 45s. And this was in my great-grandfather's attic. He lived in University Heights. And my Uncle David had this, and on the dust cover, and back then there was only the Wixie sticker. I've added some stickers since then. But, yeah, sorry, I gotta do some dusting down here in the basement. But I saw the sticker, and my Uncle David said, "Oh, yeah, Wixie, that was the station everybody listened to when I was a kid." So I always kept that in the back of my mind, because by the time I was getting into the music, whenever we came to Cleveland, I listened to this station, Magic 105, back when it was worth listening to. Scott Howitt, Denny Sanders, Norman Knight, all those great legends, Billy Bass, when they were on the station, it was a phenomenal radio station. Here, I'll go back to where I was before. Sorry, I didn't mean to...
Oh, no worries, no worries. Part of the beauty of...
It's cramped down here.
No, part of the beauty of what I do is it doesn't really matter. It's warts and all, Yeah, I do some editing here and there.
Yeah, it's raw. So, yeah, when I heard Magic 105 when I was a kid, I just thought that was the greatest sounding radio station. I mean, you had the great DJs. They were playing music that I wasn't hearing on the oldie station in St. Louis. And it just, I mean, just the sound, the processing of the radio station and the jingles, it just sounded big.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the radio station I want to work at when I grow up. So, being fascinated with radio and with records, I figured that makes the most sense. So, when it came time to picking a college, and I wanted to get out of St. Louis, just because
You had the St. Louis Blues?
I had the St. Louis Blues. Well, I think it's one of those things where when you're a rebellious 18, 19-year-old, you want to get away from your family as far away as you can. I mean, not saying that I never got homesick or anything, but it was nice to be out on my own. So I looked at a couple colleges, and I still remember, it was October of 2002. It was a Saturday, and we were touring John Carroll, and we walked down the hall in the Student Center, and I look over to my left, and I see this long-haired guy queuing up a record. And I thought, oh, that's cool! That's what I want to do! Alright, I think I'm liking this John Carroll. Hey, can we see the radio station? And of course the tour keeps going, walking by the station. I mean, that's classic. They walk by like, oh, yeah, this is our campus radio station. They just fool around, and not realizing that, no, we're actually a real radio station. So that long-haired guy, of course, is the famous Mitch Kapka of Kicking Out the Jams.
Wow.
So that was before I knew who he was. So a year later, I met John Carroll, and they had the advertising about joining the radio station, and of course I was all for it. And they paired me up with a guy named John Baryak, who was on 12 o'clock midnight on Saturday nights. And I said, oh, this is perfect. Late night, college radio, playing classic rock. Yeah, this is perfect. And it was a lot of fun. Stayed up all night playing records. It was just the perfect college radio experience when I was 19 years old. And I was obviously very excited and very anxious to get started. So John was really cool. He let me pretty much take over running the board and queuing up records. And the only thing I was not good at was talking on the radio. I was very shy. I'm actually a very shy person to begin with. I do warm up quickly to people, but I am very shy, so I can be very quiet. And it's a little nervous, your first time being on the radio.
Sure.
So when it came time for all of the newbies to apply for their own show, they requested that you make a demo. And I remember making this demo, and I was so nervous because I wanted it to be perfect. And so I made this 30-minute demo, and I submitted it. And then a couple weeks later, we had our staff meeting at Pizzazz at Fairmount Circle, and this guy, I think his name was Mark, went around to all the new guys, basically telling them, okay, yeah, your show is going to be on Tuesday morning from 9 to 11 a.m. Okay, your show is going to be on from, Saturdays from 8 to 10 a.m. And they came to me and he said, yeah, sorry, we don't have a spot for you. And
Yeah.
I was a little deflated, but I said, all right, it's November, the next semester is only a couple months away, so if it's not now, January is going to be the opportunity. And little did I know at that time, I was the only one who did not get a show.
Wow.
The only
Wow.
And
was it based on your music, or were there who you were hanging with, or what happened?
It may have been at the time. Now, in the early 2000s, the radio station was pretty much run by the fraternities and sororities. It was kind of weird. It's not like that anymore. The culture of the radio station has changed so much over the last 20 years. But yeah, it was basically guys in a frat and girls in a sorority that were running the show. And I had no interest in joining a fraternity at all. I just wanted to be my own self, my own person.
Jumpin' Joe.
Yes. But I wasn't Jumpin' Joe yet. I was just Joe Madigan. Boring old Joe Madigan. And so fast forward to January. In January of 2004, I applied for a show, and I was back in St. Louis. I didn't have a cell phone back then. I didn't have a cell phone until I was 21. So Matt Taylor, who was the station manager of WJCU at the time, he called and left a message on my parents' phone. And I had been out with my buddy Joe, probably going to the record exchange, and we came back, and my mom said, "Hey, there's a message on the phone for you." So I go pick up the phone, and actually it was this very phone right here. And I remember picking it up and punching in the code to listen to the voicemail, and it was Matt Taylor, and he goes, "Hey Joe, just want to let you know that we do have a slot available for you. It's the last slot we have. It's Sunday mornings from 5 to 7 a.m. So if you want it, just let me know." So I called him up right away. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to take it." And then I went out and I was like jumping up and down the street. I'm not joking. I literally ran outside, started jumping up and down. I was so excited to finally have my own show on the radio. And so it was Saturday. It was Sunday mornings from midnight or from 5 to 7 a.m.
Great time slot. I mean, you're getting all the people that were out late have just gone to bed. Or if they're so wired, they probably don't want to hear anything on the radio. And the people getting up early on a Sunday morning are probably going to church or something.
Right.
You know?
So, not in the mood to listen to what I wanted to play. So, a couple months earlier, back in October, I was trying to figure out what I should do for a radio show. I said, well, I can do a classic rock show, but we already have one. So I need to do something that nobody else is doing. But what should it be? And I'm a big game show fan. And in October of 2003, Rod Roddy died. He was the announcer for The Price is Right. And the article I read had a link to a tribute site to KQV Radio in Pittsburgh. And I'm going to this website, and it's click here to listen to this broadcast from 1964. Click here to listen to this broadcast from 1965. Here's Rod Roddy from 1961. So I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, wow, I can't believe it. There are actual recordings of what radio used to sound like in the 60s. This is really cool. And then I remembered the bumper sticker on my turntable.
Yeah.
And I said, well, wait, if there's recordings of KQV, maybe there's recordings of Wixie 1260.
Sure.
So I went online, and the first thing that I saw was Jack Armstrong, Wixie 1260, October 1966. So I click and listen to it, and I just couldn't believe my ears. Here's this guy who's absolutely off the wall. I mean, this guy was one of the fastest talkers in radio, and he was funny and energetic and interacting with the people calling in on the phone and playing awesome records. And after hearing that, I said, that is what I want to do. That would be fun. And somehow, trying to come up with a name for a show, I came up with, because the show I was on was Vinyl Venue.
Yeah.
So I was kind of going for the alliteration.
Yeah.
Retro radio. So that's how the idea for the show came about. Now, in the early days, the show wasn't really a true recreation of it. I was really just trying to navigate my way of just doing an oldie show.
Right.
But while I was researching Wixie, I came across a website that a guy named Dan Exton, he posted copies of the Wixie 60 survey, and there's one right over there you can take a look at. I have one on the wall. I got to thank my friend Jim from M105 for giving me that. He actually met Jack Armstrong at one of the Wixie reunions that WMJI had in the 80s, and he got it autographed. In fact, he got a couple of them autographed, so he wanted to give one to me, and that was a tremendous gift. So I'm looking at these Wixie surveys, and I realize that there are a lot of songs on here that I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I always wondered, is there more to the 60s than just the same 300 songs that they play over and over again? So when I saw these surveys, I said, this is perfect. The adventure begins of discovering all of these records. Now, a lot of these records, I mean, there's a good handful that, were rather lame, but there are so many that I just couldn't believe. Like, I still remember the first time I heard Pictures of Matchstick Men by the Status Quo. I was just blown away. It's like, I'd never heard anything like that before. It's like, this is cool! Why aren't they playing this on the radio? I have to play this! So that's how it all began. And so I was on Sunday mornings from 5 to 7, and how I did it was, I am not a morning person, not even close. So I decided to guarantee that I never miss a shift. I would stay up very late on Friday, as late as I possibly could stay up, sleep as late as I could on Saturday, stay up all night Saturday, do my show, and then go to bed, wake up at noon to try to get back on schedule because I had a class on Monday morning at 9 a.m. And I did that for 14 weeks. And by the 14th week, I was pretty tired of doing that.
Yeah.
So I went up to Matt Taylor and I said, listen, how do I get a better slot? He said, well, become a director. I said, okay. How do I do that? He said, well, we're looking for somebody to be a news director. And if you're the news director, you automatically get the Tuesday 3:30 to 6:30 slot with, the last 30 minutes being news related. I said, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Sure.
I had no idea what I was doing with the news, and it was really poorly done. I was really just reading off, campus announcements for 30 minutes, but I did it because it gave me that time slot. And so that's how I wound up on Tuesdays, 3:30 to 6:30. So that was the fall of 2005, and that's when people discovered me. I mean, it's prime drive time.
Sure.
I still remember Steve and Evelyn calling in every week. Steve and Evelyn are legendary college radio listeners. I mean, they were calling in when I was on Sunday mornings. I swear, those guys never sleep.
Wow.
And,
or turn off the station.
Yeah, they just have it on 24 hours, and it's awesome. So they found me. A lot of people found me, and that's when I started developing a listenership. And many of those listeners are still with me to this very day. I mean, you got a guy like Carl in South Euclid. I mean, he's been with me all 20 years, and you get to know these people, and they get to know, they get to know me as well.
I have the same thing going on my YouTube channels. I've got a lady in South Africa that writes poetry.
Yeah.
About the dog videos I post, and to be basically, I don't know, inspiring art by my goofy talking to the dogs while I walk them videos is mind-boggling. So I mean, I get the buzz. It's totally cool that people dig what you're doing on the radio or I'm doing on YouTube, and you never know who you're reaching, whether it just be sonically or emotionally or whatever. You play a song for someone that they haven't heard since they were a little kid and have been searching for forever. They're like, oh my God, before the internet especially.
Oh, yeah.
You had to make bells go off in people's heads,
And for any kid who might actually be watching this video, this was 2004. There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. There was no YouTube.
Well, there was YouTube.
In 2004?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was not on my radar back in 2004.
96 to 90, and I'd say 98, because I was definitely on YouTube in the 90s. My sister-in-law turned me on to it, and it was perfect for me.
But it was nothing like it is today. Not even close.
No, it was, and you could upload, like, 90 seconds of something, you know, in the beginning, like, I couldn't upload full songs, and if I could, I had to dumb them down in quality to get the file size small enough.
Oh, yeah.
And then it turned into everyone was uploading 60-minute concerts in 12-minute chunks or whatever the limit was at that point. And so that's why you see a lot of old uploads. It goes part 1 of 12.
I remember seeing those in 2006. That was the first time I had ever heard of YouTube. Somebody sent me a link to this video, and it said YouTube. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
It was the first time I'd ever seen a website devoted to strictly videos, and people were uploading all this great, television shows from the 60s, like American Bandstand and Where the Action Is and
Hullabaloo.
Yeah, and Hullabaloo. All those shows. It was kind of cool to watch some of these bands, and it was kind of lame that they were all, singing to the record, basically.
Right.
But it was still pretty cool to see them in person on the video.
And, of course, the legendary Cleveland version.
Oh, of Upbeat, right.
That's right.
Which I talk about all the time on the show.
Have you had David Spiro on?
No.
He would be a wonderful guest for your show.
Oh, absolutely. He would definitely be a fascinating person to talk to because he was on set. His dad was the producer of the show.
Yep.
So the stories he has alone, I mean, he's done so much in radio and
management.
He managed
Dickie
Joe
Betts.
Walsh.
Dickie Betts was his client who just passed yesterday.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just probably do a whole hour interviewing him about the Upbeat show, I'm sure.
Sure.
If he's ever up for something like that. I mean, I would love to meet him. I've never met him in person. I've met a lot of people, but I've never met him. So maybe one of these days our paths will cross.
Let's hope so, because I think that would be Cleveland musical magic. So.
Oh, that would be a blast. But you mentioned something about playing a record. We kind of got on the YouTube tangent.
Yeah.
But playing a record. I remember playing This Is My House by the Moody Blues. Very obscure. A hit in Cleveland. It was really only a hit in Cleveland. It's bizarre. Somebody called me up and said, dude, I just literally pulled my car over because I could not believe what I was hearing. I haven't heard that song in over 40 years. And I've had phone calls like that.
Yes, yeah.
Where people are like, I can't believe it, I haven't heard it on the radio. It's one thing to hear it on your stereo or, hear it on YouTube. But to hear it on the radio, for a lot of people, that's something special.
I'm the same way. Like, watching something on television, to me, is more special than choosing to stream it, the same program. And they're like, oh, you can stream it without commercials on Amazon. And I go, yeah, but you never end up choosing wanting to watch it. But when you're flipping by and you see a Twilight Zone episode and you go, oh, yeah, it's only 6 minutes in, you watch it.
Yeah, and what, is that channel 55-6?
All those channels, all those 55.3 is my favorite. It's the Movies Network.
Okay.
And they've got like Thursday Night Noir and Sunday Night Noir, and they show films you've never heard of before. And I love broadcasting. Radio is so horrible right now.
Oh.
My God, talk radio is dead in the water. There's so few choices. It's all like one limited view from the most part. It's all corporate. I'm glad I'm not driving around the country and having to hear the same syndicated shows in every market, Yeah,
I mean, the guy who's on Magic 105 now in the afternoons, he's not even in Cleveland. He's in Dallas, Texas.
Or Martha Quinn.
Yeah, I mean, those people have probably never stepped foot in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not the same. That's why a lot of people who were commercial listeners for the longest time, they're starting to come to the left end of the dial to check out college radio stations like CSB and RUW and JCU.
We're so lucky. We have so many by comparison to other metropolitan areas.
Oh, yeah. I mean, St. Louis has, they have a college station, but they play jazz. that's cool because no other station in St. Louis is doing that. And there is one community radio station that's very much like, RUW and CSB combined, but nothing like that anywhere else. Cleveland is very special that way, and it is really, really cool. And with what was I going to say about CSB and RUW? Oh yeah, the thing is, even though we're all college radio stations, we all have our different sound. You know what I mean? Our different feel to the radio station, a different vibe. RUW has a different vibe than CSB, and CSB definitely has a different vibe than JCU. I don't know if you've ever felt that.
I guess the only thing I could say is, and it might not even be true anymore, but I always viewed CSB as the punkier station, and RUW as the folkier, bluesier station,
yes.
And UJC as the potpourri station.
Which it certainly is. It's really unbelievable, and it's really a great radio station to be a part of. And somebody at one point asked me to come over to WRUW. It wasn't Johnny Midnight. It was somebody else who used to be on JCU. And I said, no, I wouldn't fit in. I wouldn't fit in because I do like to play the hits.
Right.
I mean, I mix it in with the other stuff you don't hear. But, I like playing hits every once in a while, and they'll throw me out of here in a heartbeat at RUW. So JCU has always been my home. Ray Carr over at CSB, I'm a friend of his, and I've been a guest on his show before, and that's been a real thrill. And, people have certainly discovered his show as well. I mean, he's playing a lot of the similar music that I'm playing.
Yeah.
He goes really deep into some really obscure stuff, which is great, which is awesome because you have variety.
And you others are getting exposure to what they would not otherwise.
Oh yeah.
Passive discovery is so much more rewarding than aimed discovery.
It's true. And that's the great thing about radio, and that's what I strive for my radio show. When I do a show, I want you to not only hear something great that you love, but also discover something you've never heard before that's from that era that somehow, some way, never got played on the radio and deserves another chance. So I'm giving those records another chance, and it's a real thrill for me.
Well, your passion is undeniable. Anybody that's ever heard you has to think that you are the real deal from 30 years ago on tape or something. It is like listening to the radio. That my earliest radio memories, you bring those back. Driving around in the mid 60s in my mom's car when I was 4 years old. That's what you remind me of. So you've done an incredible job.
Well, thank you. Now, I know with retro radio, I try to sound more like, a boss jock from that era, like Jack Armstrong or the real Don Steele.
Or the Duke.
Oh, yeah, the Duke or Larry Morrow.
Hey.
But he was very smooth.
His stepdaughters went to elementary school with me, so I was their sun-pressed paper boy.
Ah.
One of my first crushes was one of his stepdaughters, so.
How about that?
Yeah. The Duke.
Yeah.
I bumped into him over at her store over by the Greenville.
Yeah?
Yeah, she's got that mercantile antique store over by the Greenville. You ever seen that?
What road is it on?
I don't know the name of that street that the Greenville's on the corner of. It's like one street south of South Street. Oh, Pine Street, I guess it is. It is.
In Chagrin Falls?
Yeah, Pine Street. So right next to the Greenville's an antique shop that the Duke's daughter owns, and he's in there all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I just might have to stop by one of these days.
I'll bet you if you went in there and dropped something off, you'd get a phone call the next time he's there.
Wow.
And you know what? I'll stop in. I'll grease the path.
That'd be awesome. I've never met No, actually, that's not true. I have met Larry Morrow. He was doing a show on Sirius Gold.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Back when he had, choices, Sirius versus XM. And he was doing a show live from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that's how I met Norman Knight, too.
Yeah, and he was on there, and the woman that just passed away, wasn't Dusty Street on there as well?
She
Yeah.
was live from Cleveland as well.
Yeah.
Which is funny. I don't know how she wound up in Cleveland because she was always on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think of her as an LA person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool that she wound up in Cleveland, and I don't even think they broadcast anything from the Rock Hall anymore, which is really sad.
It is. I didn't even think about it, but it's been ages since I've heard them say anything like that. And yeah, we won't go down the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame pathway, or we won't finish that conversation.
Yeah, we'll let's move on. But you talk about how I present myself on the radio. We just had the WJCU open house a couple weeks ago. And there were listeners that I've known for almost 20 years that I met in person for the very first time. And there were people that came up to me and said, "Oh, you really do sound like that in real life." I'm like, yes! People ask me, "What's your radio voice?" "Oh, yes, this is Joe Madigan. I'm on the radio. That's my radio voice." No, I'm really me. And I actually, a couple summers ago, I got an email from a guy who said he loved the music I played, but he couldn't stand me. He goes, "Stop acting like one of those old-time disc jockeys. Just stop it." And I emailed him back and I said, "Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the music that I play, but that's actually me. That's who I am. And if it's not your style, I understand. I mean, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. Some people want the more laid-back kind of DJs, but I think there are more of them than there are of me. So, again, I'm trying to do something different and being authentic. I mean, what you hear on the radio is authentic. It's really me. It's really me getting excited about playing the music, playing these records, and cranking that volume knob all the way up to 11. That's me! I'm not faking it! So, I explained that to him, and I said, "Hey, listen to Ray Carr. Listen to the grumpy old man." He goes, "I can't stand the grumpy old man either." I'm like, well, maybe you are the real grumpy old man then. But, so, yeah, there are people that, 99% of the people that listen to the show like me. There's 1% out there that can't stand me, but still listen anyway, and that's okay.
Hey, the music is what they're coming for, and,
right.
And if they get the... if they get the Jumpin Joe Madigan craze that the rest of your listeners do, then more power to them.
There's somebody out on the west side who called me one day and said, I want you to play this record, but I want you to really be excited or really give a great anecdote about the record as you're talking it up." There are people that say that I help make the record sound new again. I give it new life. There's a difference between playing a record, which you've heard 30,000 times, but when you have a real live human being that actually cares about the record, talking it up, suddenly it becomes exciting again.
And even touching it and feeling it. Queuing up a record, in the physical part of being a DJ, is real. How the people on Sirius do their shows, clicking on a digital file and clicking on digital files instead of having cart machines to throw in their loops and all that stuff. I'm sure you've got some digitization compared to my data point of radio, but there's something to be said for doing it the old analog, old school ethic way. So,
And that's the reason why I never worked in commercial radio, for more reasons than one.
Well, you were doing stuff with the Cavs and so. What was your?
Yes, it was a great setup because the Cleveland Cavaliers I worked with them from 2008 until 2010 or 11. And the great thing about the Cavs, they were one of 3 NBA teams that controlled the radio broadcasts. And everything originated from the arena. So I didn't work for a radio station per se.
Oh, wow.
I worked for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
That's cool.
And the department I worked in was the radio department, and I got to run the board. And when I got there in 2010, they were still using the same board and the same computer software that they had since 1994 when the Gund Arena opened. I could not believe it. They were using a DOS-based program
Wow.
to play the commercials and to play other play the highlights. They used to have cart machines, but then they put it on this program.
Sure.
And I remember asking Scott Zarilla, who was the producer at the time, I said, well, when you're recording a commercial or a highlight, how can you edit it without seeing the waveforms? And he goes, what's a waveform?
Oh my God.
It's like, how do you do that on a DOS-based program? I mean, he just did it by ear.
Sure.
And he goes, well, at least we don't have to use the razor blade and the tape anymore. Although we did use a reel-to-reel player as a backup. So if we were recording the coach's interview, and for whatever reason it failed on the digital end, we had a reel-to-reel backup, which we actually had to use one time. It was crazy, the archaic technology, and outside the DOS program, I was really digging it because I liked the old school stuff. And then a year later they went,
totally
with all
digital.
new stuff, and at one point they realized, Joe, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, we're screwed because you're the only one on this planet that knows what they're doing behind this board during a Cavs broadcast. So they hired Marty Allen.
Wow.
To come in and kind of hang out in the studio and basically learn everything from me. And so they say, hey, if you're ever sick, you actually have somebody that can run the board. I mean, I had to go down to the arena when I had the flu, because when there's a game, you got to show up.
Yeah.
And there's nobody else to do the job, so I had to be there, whether I had a flu or a cold, whatever the case was. I had to be there. And so yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. And as a result, I was probably paid a lot better too, because I wasn't working for Clear Channel Communications.
Right. Well,
They probably would have paid me minimum wage, while at the Cavs they were paying me. They started me out at $12 an hour, and I thought, wow, $12 an hour, this is great, because I was working at Giant Eagle making $7.25.
wow.
Yeah, I went to John Carroll for 4 years, and I was doing some television gigs, doing behind-the-scenes stuff, wrapping cable, basically, at sporting events. But, I was working at Giant Eagle. It was awful. I hated it. Hated working there. But then I started working for the Cavs, $12 an hour. This is great. And then, 3 months later, Dave Dombrowski calls me and goes, hey, just want to let you know that, we really like what you're doing, and we're going to bump your pay up. I said, oh, okay. They're probably going to, give me, an extra 50 cents or $1, just like Giant Eagle. He goes, we're going to bump you up to $18 an hour. $18 an hour! Wow! This is great! I'm going to be able to pay the rent that I still owe. Yeah, so I got all excited about $18 an hour, and they were not going to pay me $18 an hour at Clear Channel. There's no way.
No. How long were you with the Cavs?
About 2.5 years.
Why did you leave that?
That was probably the hardest decision I ever made in my life, because I loved working for the Cavaliers, but it got to the point where I was about 26 years old at the time, and I started thinking about what my life is going to be like in the future and what I really wanted in life. And I said, well, radio's a lot of fun, but there's definitely a big void in my life. And the void was, finding someone special to be with for the rest of my life. And I realized, I want to be a dad someday. And I want to be married and be a dad and have a family. and working Christmas Day for the Cavaliers, working on Easter, working these odd hours. I mean, there are people that do it all the time, and that's great, but I said if I had the choice, if I had the choice to, set my own hours, or at least have regular hours and make it work, that's what I'd rather do. So that's exactly what happened. It kind of all fell into place at once. So long story short, I leave the Cavs and I take a job as a life insurance agent.
I remember.
And I somehow, some way, I survived that for 7.5 years before I got burned out. But yeah, so I started with the life insurance company, and then about a year later, I meet my wife, and then a year later, we got married, and then a year after that, we welcomed our first child. And
then a year after that, you welcomed your second child. Then a year after that, you welcomed your third child. Am I off base?
No, that's the timeline there is pretty much spot on. So,
what is the biggest gap between children now within your parental line?
I think it's 20 months.
Wow.
Which isn't that bad.
No, that one's longer than what my perception was, but I have to be honest, I had lost count in the blur of procreation that is Jumpin Joe Madigan, and now Jumpin Joe conjures up a different meaning, doesn't it, folks?
Jumpin Joe Madigan as a dad, and I don't think the kids are definitely entertained when I'm playing records for them. They love watching the records spin on the turntable, which you obviously can't do with an MP3.
Right.
But no, I'm outside of radio, I am just a really boring, dreadfully boring person. At least I think so, because I'm an accountant now. I do tax work, so tax season's finally over. And I'm a dad. I'm like, oh, pick up your room. John, put some pants on, just changing diapers and cleaning up after people. And it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. As soon as you get to the other side, you have to go back and start all over again. That's what it's like cleaning the house when you have all these kids. But it's fun. I enjoy it. It's what I felt called to do in life. And with radio, I certainly didn't want to give it up. So that's one of the reasons why I'm down in the basement today. Is I used to do the show live when it was retro radio, and then it got to the point where it was better if I was here at home on Saturdays. So I said, all right, how can we make this work? I said, well, I can do it. I can do a show from home. All I need is a microphone and a computer to record the show. But I can't do retro radio because retro radio really involves a lot of live interaction, and it's just a frantic pace. While this show is not nearly as frantic. It's a little more loose and laid back, which I like. It's something different, and I'm glad I'm doing the new show now. And I've been doing the show. It'll be 5 years in May. And
didn't COVID enter timetable-wise? Wasn't it right about the start of COVID? Or
So this was May of 2019 when I started the new show.
Okay.
And little did I know that less than a year later, everybody would be at home doing a radio show, basically. Right. I mean, John Carroll, out of all the college radio stations, JCU was the only one that allowed people to be in the studio under strict conditions.
Right.
I mean, even 3 years after the COVID outbreak, maybe 2 years, unless you were a member of staff, you were not allowed in the studio.
Wow.
At all. They have since relaxed that, which is great because, the lovely Mrs. Madigan would help me out during Radiothon. She would, help with the phones and whatnot. They wouldn't let her do it. It's like, dude, we live in the same house.
Yeah.
But the rules are the rules, as whether or not they make sense or not, it's the rules. So, but fortunately, all that stuff is behind us, hopefully forever.
So I have some stock questions that I ask people, and I think you're going to hit a homer with what's your best brush with greatness? I mean, working with the Cavs, you had to have unbelievable brushes with greatness. And
right before I started working for the Cavs, I was doing what's called utility work for Fox Sports Ohio. So so basically my job was to sit on the not on the sidelines, but at the end court with the camera guy. And during the timeouts, the camera guy would rush over to the huddle and video what was going on there. And I was the guy behind the cameraman, wrapping the cable, making sure none of the players tripped over the cables. Because can you imagine if the biggest star in the world, LeBron James, tripped over the cable and got injured, and it was my fault? I would be the next Steve Bartman. It's like, I do not want to be the next Steve Bartman.
Which let's help people who don't understand Chicago baseball history.
Yeah. So, yeah, 2003 National League Championship Series. The Cubs are 5 outs away from going to the World Series. There's a foul ball along the third base line, and a fan naturally reaches out for it, and Moises Alou is down there. He's trying to catch the ball, and they kind of collide, and Steve Bartman, I don't even know if he actually caught the ball or not, and Moises Alou just throws his glove down and just goes nuts. And the next pitch is a ground ball to the shortstop. All he had to do was field the ball and turn the double play. He bobbles the ball. And the next thing you know, the Florida Marlins score 7 runs that inning. And then you figure, well, there's Game 7. The Marlins win the National League Championship, and they go on to win another World Series. So Steve Bartman became the GOAT. Yep. And it's absolutely
GOAT in its old meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the Billy Goat.
Yeah.
And the whole thing originated in Chicago because the guy wanted to bring this Billy Goat to Wrigley Field. They wouldn't let him, so they said the Cubs it was the Billy Goat curse.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a restaurant in Chicago on Navy Pier. It might still be there. It's called the Billy Goat Tavern.
Huh.
You can read all about the history there if you're ever in Chicago. So this poor guy basically had to go into what do you call it when the Secret Service pretty much has
protection?
Yeah.
Witness protection.
Yeah, he had to basically go into witness protection. Nobody knows where he is. And this poor guy.
And we're looking at what? Almost 30 years now?
20 years. Yeah, it was
20 years.
21 years ago this year. That was in 2003. I remember when that happened, and then somebody pulled the fire alarm in Murphy Hall, and we were all rushing to find a TV. And when we finally found a TV, we couldn't believe that the Marlins had scored 7 runs. We're like, this is a total collapse.
Yeah.
And what those Cubs fans did to Steve Bartman is just ridiculous. And, of course, they win the World Series against the Indians in 2016. It's like, so they don't deserve it.
I derailed you from your brush with greatness.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I didn't want to be the next Steve Bartman. So I'm wrapping the cable, going back to the end court. So I'm backing up, and I bump into somebody. I'm like, oh, sorry about that. And I didn't know who I was bumping into. And then I look up. It was LeBron James. I'm like, oh, let me get out of here. It's like, I don't want to touch the guy. But I literally bumped into him.
I was going to say, that might be the first actual brush with greatness.
Exactly.
The rest of them have all been, well, I was close to him. You got his sweat on you, I imagine.
Oh, probably.
Hopefully that's all.
Yeah. That's all I want from LeBron James. If that.
All right, first concert.
First concert. I will give my first arena concert and my first Beachland concert.
Okay.
Because they're both special. My first concert was in 2003, May of 2003, and I got the ticket stub somewhere up there. Billy Joel and Elton John. Elton John is the reason why I got into music. And I sort of idolized him in a way because When I was in the 3rd grade, I got glasses. And back then, glasses were not cool. If you wore glasses, you were a dork, nerd, etc., etc. So suddenly I became the target of those name-calling. And, you know, it was not fun at all. So I'm the only kid in my class wearing glasses. And in the 4th grade, maybe it was still the 3rd grade, I was sick. So I was home from school watching Nickelodeon, and they had a rerun of The Muppet Show. And in walks this guy with these glasses on that I thought were really cool. I was like, man, he's got some cool glasses on. And all of a sudden he starts, you know, busting out Crocodile Rock, and they have the crocodile puppets singing the La 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 part. And I said, I like this guy. I like this guy. And the glasses was what drew me to Elton John.
That's neat.
And I wanted to look a lot like Elton John. I mean, not mid-70s flashy Elton John, but more of the early 70s, you know, when he was trying to be more like, when he was trying to look more like John Lennon. You know, classic Beatles look.
Ironically, one of my very first musical loves, too. It was the Beatles and Elton John. And same era. I mean, 72 to 74, 5 was my Elton John fandom, you know. And I remember telling my 7th grade teacher, yeah, I'm going to have a radio station when I grow up. It's only going to play Elton John, Simon and Garfunkel, and the Beatles. That's it.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I get it. Elton John was amazing.
First album I ever bought, I don't know if that's in your questionnaire or not. Bought it at Vintage Vinyl in St. Louis for $3. 11/17/70. Phenomenal live album. And the reason why they released it was because the concert aired on WABC FM and was widely bootlegged.
Yeah. So
they Uni Records, they wanted to cash in on it, so they made this album. Of course, in other countries, it's 17/11/70. And so I have this on cassette, I got the CD, I got the bootleg of the broadcast, I got everything. And then Record Store Day, a couple years ago, they came out with 17/11/70 plus. And I lost my mind. I'm like, I have to have that! So I said to the lovely Mrs. Madigan, I have found the Christmas present that you are going to get me this year. And this was it. And I was so thrilled because not only does it have the original album, but it has the other songs from that concert that were not on the original album.
But we're on the bootleg.
Yeah, but, you know, the bootleg, you know, it's, you know, kind of, you know, it's been watered down from tape trade to tape trade to tape trade, and it doesn't sound as good, but here you get, you know, superior quality. The only downside to this is that you don't get a lot of the, you know, the interaction with the audience and the other banter in between songs. They omit that for some reason, and I don't know why. But I'm not gonna complain because I'm really happy to have this album. So Elton John is what got me into music. So that's why it was very important for me to see him. I really wanted to see him, and that I'm a Billy Joel fan as well, but more Elton John. So that was a real thrill for me to see him in person. When I came
Beachland
and the Beachland Ballroom, you know what? I did see a show before the Beachland, but the Beachland Ballroom, my first show at the Beachland was very special. I remember it was September of 2005. I get a call at the radio station, and the guy, I say hello, and he just goes off. He goes, Joe Madigan, this is Dave Atkins of the New Salem Witch Hunters. We are performing on Saturday, whatever date it is, at the Beachland Tavern. It's our 20th anniversary show. Be there. We're gonna do all these killer 60s songs like Outside Chance by the Turtles, which I know you love. So be there. So I showed up. And Dave Atkins had his tux on for the 20th anniversary show. And it was great, and he just went nuts. It was the first time Actually, it was the second time I ever met Dave Atkins. The first time I met him, he confused me with somebody else. Because I was at a record show, and Dan Dorco, who was in the Dukes of Windsor, he's Duke Dan, sadly the late great Duke Dan, he introduced me to Dave Atkins, and he thought I was a DJ on CSB, and when he found out I'm not the guy you think I am, he was like, oh, sorry about that, and he walked away. At that point, he didn't know who I was, but then he found my show, and so the second time I met him was really the first authentic time that I met Dave Atkins, because finally he knew who I was, and I knew who he was. And he said, hey, Joe, you gotta meet my friend, you gotta meet the guitarist of the band, Tom Fallon. It's like, Tom, you gotta meet this guy. He loves 60s garage. You gotta talk to this guy. So Tom kind of gives me that look. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I got that look too.
I don't know. I mean, so what are you listening to? And I said, well, I've been really digging the Rationals lately. He goes, okay, you're for real. That's all it took. And we've been great friends ever since. I saw Dave Atkins at the end of Radiothon. He came by, he brought me this phenomenal album from the Buckinghams, which you would think, wait, the Buckinghams? You would think it'd be an album full of fillers. It's like, no, this album is really cool.
Yeah.
It's completely random, and it's great. There's just some mind-blowing songs on this album. In One Ear and Gone Tomorrow from 1968. Great album. So he brought that to me, and I was so happy to see him. It'd been years since I saw Dave Atkins. And then Tom Fallon, I was over at his house about a year ago, and whenever I go there, we always lose track of time. And really, Tom Fallon's basement is the inspiration for this show.
Wow.
Because Tom Fallon, you go downstairs, and then you go to the right, and you're in this wood-paneled room with vintage furniture, and it's full of records, and Tom always has the best beer. And so you sit on the leather sofa, and you're listening to all these killer garage records cranked all the way up to 11. His collection is just mind-blowing. I mean, he's got records that nobody else has, and he bought them for $2 back in 1981.
Yeah.
So I said, that's it. That's going to be the concept for Jumpin' Joe's Basement Show. You come down here to the basement, you sit on the black leather sofa, you have a beverage like this Kolsch here, or even better, this WMMS brew from Brew Kettle. It's actually really good. Buzzard brew. This stuff I think it has a kick to it. I don't know. It just, beer usually kind of mellows you out, but this really, energizes me. So I don't know what they put in this stuff, but it's good.
It could be the BLF bash for all you know.
So that's the idea of the show. It's like you're in my basement, you're hanging out with me, and now granted, as you've noticed by now, I don't have wood paneling. I don't have an orange shag carpet. It's all theater of the mind. So we've all been to that room with the orange shag carpet and the wood paneled room.
I don't think anybody could say this wasn't a cool room, though, Joe.
I'm a big sports fan. Like I mentioned, I grew up in St. Louis, so I have a lot of St. Louis memorabilia. But the team I lived and died with in the 90s was the Cleveland Indians.
Me too.
I loved that team. And, of course, they broke my heart twice in the 90s, and they still continue to break my heart in the 2000s and in the 10s, and who knows, maybe in the 20s, the Indians, now the Guardians, will finally win the World Series.
Joe, where do you live?
I live in Cleveland, Ohio.
What happens in Cleveland, Ohio?
Well, I like to think that the jinx is broken, thanks to the Cavaliers. And the Lake Erie Monsters. They won the Calder Cup 8 days before the Cavs won the championship.
And since then?
Well, since then, nothing, but... Well, yeah.
Do you want to bet one of these kids on...
No. Well, 2016... Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Game 7 of the 2016 World Series and that stupid rain delay. The rain came out of nowhere for 20 minutes, and it ruined all momentum. But, woulda, coulda, shoulda. There are things leading up to that the Indians could have done better. So, yeah, it's easy to blame a rainstorm. Yeah, momentum killer, yeah. It'll definitely ruin it for you. But, they should have wrapped it up in Game 6. But
one day, I don't know.
one of these days. You like to think. But the last time they won the World Series, that was their pennant. I found that in my great-grandfather's attic along with the turntable a long time ago. And there's a ticket from the World Series that somebody decided to write the score of the game in green ink on the ticket, so the ticket is worthless, but it's still cool to have.
Hey.
I wish I had more Indians memorabilia, because I really am a big Cleveland Indians fan. That 95 team is something that was so special. I don't think we'll ever see that again. They were just so good. Every 8 out of the 9 guys in that starting lineup batted over 300. It was unbelievable.
You never gave up on them, no matter how far behind they were, and they came back from behind so many times. It was so exciting, and Albert Bell, just like, for me, anytime he got up, I'm giving myself goosebumps just saying Albert Bell's name.
He was my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. And that team, I was a season ticket holder from like 86 till about 96. And after they broke my heart, I had to stop. And no, I guess we did 97 because we saw the World Series that year too. But then after that, it was just like...
The worst night of my life was Game 7 of the 97 World Series. I'll just leave it at that. But here are all my scorecards from going to Indians games over the years. I've been to, I think, 54 Indians games. One at the old stadium, 48 at Jacobs Field. Yes, I still call it Jacobs Field.
Me too.
And 3 or 4 outside of Jacobs Field. I've seen 2 in St. Louis and 2 in Kansas City. So yeah, and I have all my Indians tickets up there. I'm in the process of scanning them right now, and I want to build a collage of all my Indians tickets and hang it up on the wall here. It's just so many tremendous memories over the years. And when I came to John Carroll, I was finally able to go to Indians games again. I went in '94 for the first time, August 1st of '94, a week before the strike. What could have been. And then...
And that year they were 144, one of the best records ever in baseball. I think it was the 5th highest
95.
winning. Oh, was that 95?
That was 95.
Oh, was it 95?
Yeah, that was
okay.
after the strike.
Okay.
The shortened season.
Yeah.
They could have won 120 games that year.
Yeah,
They were just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But the umpires decided to change the strike zone for the Atlanta pitching, but I digress. And then I went in '96, and I went to the game with the famous Kenny Lofton catch. I was in the upper deck along the third base line with my dad, and B.J. Surhoff hit that ball, and I'm like, oh no, this one is gone. And I saw Kenny Lofton climb that wall and catch the ball. It was deafening. I mean, you can watch the YouTube videos, and I still watch it over and over again, and I'm still blown away. It's the greatest catch I've ever seen, and it was deafening for like 5 minutes. It was incredible. It was an amazing time to be at Jacobs Field. It was so good.
My only baseball memory that wasn't eclipsed by Jacobs Field was Frank Robinson's opening day, '75. We were at junior high, right by John Carroll at Byron Junior High School on Shaker Boulevard at Belvoir. That school there. Every boy in 7th grade cut class. We took the Rapid downtown. That place had 74,420 people. I'll never forget the attendance that day.
And you were there?
I was there, yeah.
Wow.
And oh my God, it was so full of kids. Half of it were all kids from all over Cleveland cutting class. And I mean, and that was when they struggled to get 750,000 fans the whole season, and they got 74,000 the first game.
So much history happened that game. Frank Robinson, first black manager in the American
Wins
League.
it with the home run.
Yeah, first at bat. and Joe Tate had the call. Somebody finally uploaded a partial broadcast of that game.
Wow.
And Joe Tate's call is absolutely incredible. Yeah, what a tremendous moment in baseball history right there, and you got to see it live,
yes.
which is very cool.
And it was, my generation of kids, your mom and dad were like, just be home by dinner and act responsibly and act in a way that you're not going to shame the family. And, I mean, we could do whatever we wanted. We'd get on that rapid transit, go to baseball games, go downtown and go record shopping. I was buying records at the Record Rendezvous where the name rock and roll was coined on Public Square.
300 Prospect Avenue.
Right off of Public Square. Like 3 storefronts off of Public Square was where that was.
Wow.
And the dudes from Perubu who was the clerks in there.
Oh my goodness.
Jim Jones and stuff like that were the people working in that store. And then we'd take the rapid, we'd transfer and go out to the airport and screw around out there, and we'd eat at the lunch counter. One time we were there and Colonel Sanders was there.
No way.
I'm not lying. I mean, he bought our lunches for us at the lunch counter. Matt Crouch, you can comment and confirm this story, can't you? And
wow,
we had so much fun off those rapid transits. But my junior high years were right at Belvoir and Shaker Boulevard, right close to where you were talking about. And Pizzazz, when I was growing up, was the precursor to yours truly, called Our Gang.
Okay.
And it was the first cool gourmet burger joint or whatever. It was also the first game room I ever saw in my life. That was where we saw our first Space Invaders game. They had the Tommy pinball machine when it came out. Yeah.
That's really cool.
So yeah, John Carroll, that was always close to my heart. We'd go play. That's where we played pickup football games. There, or the private schools around the corners and stuff. And your friends. That was back when kids actually did stuff. We're playing pickup football at 2. And there'd be like 40 kids, and you'd hope that you would be one of the ones picked, and there'd be kids left over. Baseball was the same, elementary school, there'd be pickup games all the time. The only games I see on fields these days are organized Little League, You never see like neighborhood pickup games anymore,
Yeah, which is sad, and those are the best games. Because, it's
no parents, no rules. You're learning. You're impressing the older kids. It drives you to be better.
Yeah, you're out there for fun.
Yeah. Any of your kids playing ball?
Just in the backyard. Yeah.
Did you play baseball growing up?
Yes, I did. In the 2nd grade, we won the North County CYC Championship. And then for the next 4 or 5 years, we became the Cleveland Indians of the 70s. We won like 2 games a year. And I hated it. Absolutely hated it. So, my childhood, I felt like the real Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
Because I always lost. My teams always lost. Even the St. Louis Blues, when they had Wayne Gretzky and Brett Hull, I'm thinking, Stanley Cup, baby! And then they lose in the 2nd round to the Steve Yzerman goal from the blue line in double overtime. That crushed me. The 2 sporting events that really crushed me was the Steve Yzerman goal and Game 7 of the 97 World Series. Worst night of my life. It was supposed to be the best night of my life. Yeah.
One day, Joe.
One day.
Cleveland will be on top of the world one day.
The Cavs won the championship. That was fun. I mean, I think everybody had a buzz for about a week, at least.
Yeah.
It was definitely a great time. I'm thinking, man, this was the Cavs winning it, and really, they're kind of the 3rd team in town.
I agree. It's as big as NBA is, it's not football and it's not baseball. And frankly, to me, baseball is the grand old game. Football is second in my heart. I don't know if it's second in everybody's head. It seems like football is number 1 these days in a lot of
Especially
ways.
in Cleveland. I've always been a big baseball fan. I mean, I grew up in a baseball town. My grandfather, who lived his entire life in Cleveland, he would listen to... I remember him being in the basement, and he'd be keeping score of the game on TV, and then he'd be keeping score of the game that he was listening to on the radio. He would pick up WJR out in Detroit,
yeah,
and listen to games there. And there's literally file cabinets full of loose leaf paper of my grandfather keeping score of all these games that he listened to. So my grandfather was a big-time baseball fan, and it's just, you know, it's in our blood, I guess.
Yeah.
And so baseball is always number one for me. Since I grew up in St. Louis, hockey's number two. But, you know, in Cleveland, yeah, if the Indians or the Guardians win the World Series, it's going to be an even bigger parade than the Cavs. And if the Browns win the Super Bowl, the city's going to have to shut down for a week. Because it would just be... It would have to literally be like a 50-mile-long parade. I mean, it would have to be all the Browns backers from all over the world. It would be nuts.
Yeah. They think the eclipse brought people to town. You know, imagine what a championship would do to people coming here for Cleveland Browns stuff. It'd be craziness.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to see the Browns do anything anytime soon. The Guardians, maybe. We'll see.
Don't curse at talking about the record or anything right now, Joe. Somebody was gloating about it. I'm like, shh.
I know, it's early in the season, but, you know, baseball keeps expanding the playoffs, which they should not do. They should have left it alone.
Yeah.
With the format they had in the late 90s. But, you know, all you have to do is sneak into the playoffs. Once you're in, anything can happen.
Yeah. It depends on who's healthy and on top of it, so...
Yeah. So, I know we kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but my first show at the Beachland was the New Salem Witch Hunters, and it was phenomenal.
So, Joe, thank you very much. This has been cool.